Know this watercolor technique in just a few minutes. Lifting or erasing pigments in watercolor is a very powerful technique. This is a method to get rid of some of the pigments from the chosen areas of the painting to create highlights, or in this example, holes and marks in the leaves. Notice in the first leaf, I have a dry paper towel swab and I'm scrubbing the pigment to create some highlights. This obviously works when the colors are still wet or damp on the paper. The amount one can lift or erase depends on the level of dampness on the paper, also on the amount of pressure we apply, and most importantly, the time elapsed since you laid down the pigment. Now I'm simply adding some dark pigment to create some edges and shadows. Now take a look at the second leaf. In this case, I'm using the lifting technique to create some holes and marks on the leaves. With a swab of a paper towel that is bunched up into a round tip, I am pressing it against the paper and creating several white spots. Just finishing some shadows and tips. In this third example, I'm using this technique a bit more creatively. Once I've laid down the pigment, I'm using the towel swab to lighten the edges of the leaves. And I'm doing this by very gently scrubbing the leaf edges with the paper towel from the outer edge towards the inner ridge. Now to finish off the leaf, I'm marking the central ridge with the darker pigment, and I'm also dropping some of the darker pigment on the outer edges, very gently. Now I once again use the technique I used in the second leaf. With the dry paper towel swab, I'm making some holes on the leaves. Now I'm finishing the hidden part of the leaf. darkening the central ridge again. To complete the leaves, I'm finishing off the veins on the leaves with a very thin brush and a slightly darker pigment. Once we add veins to the leaves, it does really look like a leaf. For the second leaf, I'm drawing the veins slightly far apart and I'm avoiding the holes on the leaves. With the same darker pigment, I'm adding a very thin outline to the holes. This makes the holes look realistic. Now finishing off the third leaf with some thin veins and some outlines on the holes. And this is just one way to utilize this very powerful technique. Just imagine the possibilities. And we are also not limited to just using a cotton swab or a paper towel swab for lifting. Another common way to lift the pigment is a very dry and thirsty brush or even a piece of sponge. So I hope you found this useful. With a little bit of practice and repetition, this is one technique that will just keep rewarding.